still joining, so bear with me, folks, while I just kind of wait for that to sort out. I'll cover off some housekeeping. Number one, we are recording this event, so expect what you say to get out there on social media, etc., etc., etc. Number two, we have some press present, some media present, which is always great. We're remarkably pleased with the amount of press coverage we've been able to drum up over the last couple of weeks in particular. Number three, we've got a pretty hard stop at 4:30. The reason being, folks, is that after today's meeting that starts now, myself and the rest of the Woodford 10 are going to be spending some time on strategy. For reasons that will become clear, we think we've got a very, very busy few weeks ahead of us, and we need to optimize our use of time and very, very little resource. And of course, that means getting our strategy right, getting our tactics right. Chris Walker, I have seen your email in response to the conversation we had last week. I've seen it, but I've not had a chance to reply to it yet. It's one of about, I think, 600 unread emails.
I can imagine.
But I have seen it, and thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will reply to it ASAP. Thank you. Okay, in terms of setting out a very loose agenda for today's meeting, what I'm proposing is we talk about comments about the outcome of the vote. I'm then going to talk about the video interview schedule. I'll explain. I'm then going to talk about the losses questionnaire. I'll explain. We'll then get some thoughts about the legal processes that are relevant. I'm also going to invite any of the lawyers here, for example, Katie from RGL, lawyers or parties connected to lawyers, to share any thoughts they may want to share. I'm trying to find Katie's name here. I'll then invite the rest of the Woodford 10 to share their thoughts, as I normally do. And I'll then invite, if we have any members of the Isle of Man 2 here, I'll invite them to share their thoughts as well. And we need to cram all that into the next 57 minutes. If there's anything that anybody wants to cover that doesn't sound like I've just mentioned it, please feel free to put in the chat. We're pretty, agile and dynamic. This is not a bureaucratic approach at all. It's pretty flexible. So if there's anything you want to make sure we talk about, please do pop it into the chat. Also, talking about popping things into the chat, there's been quite a bit of press coverage, I think, over the last 24, 48 hours or so since the vote outcome was announced. If anybody has links to any press coverage that you've seen, please do pop it in the chat. I've not had a time to kind of scurry and sort of search for what's out there. It would just save a bunch of time if we could do that. Woodford Campaign Group, Woodford 10. I've got the WhatsApp group here. If there's anything you want to circulate a note amongst us during the course of today's meeting, rest of Woodford 10, please don't hesitate to do so. All right, I think we've got all the organisational stuff out of the way. Let's dive into the first part of our agenda, which is comments about the outcome of the vote. I'll go first of all to the Woodford 10. So any Woodford 10 folks like to comment about the outcome of the vote, and then I'll go to anybody else just to see if there's if there are any other comments that people would like to make. So first of all, any Woodford 10 folks, wave at me if you want to say something about the outcome of the vote. Mr. Alan Pyatt, lovely to have you with us. Alan's got to be one of the most enthusiastic and energetic and energized people in the Woodford 10. It's wonderful to have him as part of the team. It really is. Alan, get stuck into it, sir. What do you want to say about the vote? Thank you.
Right. I think Link have been very disingenuous in how they presented it in just percentage terms of the people that voted.
Please expand on that, because that's a new thought. I've not picked up on that. Explain to everybody what you just said. Thank you.
Well, basically, you can do anything with percentages. So they can say 93%, 93.7% voted yes.
That's what I
And if
thought.
you take that literally, that is people could, and that's what's been in the press. I've seen it in the FT, Investment Week, and a few others. They're all saying it's been approved. But 93.7% does not reflect 93.7% of the investors. It's nothing like it.
Right.
It's about 17 or 18%, depending on what the actual numbers were. So only 18% of the actual investors who should be able to vote, we estimate that to be about 300,000 that could, only 17% have voted yes. So I am going to send something to the High Court because I was there on the 10th. I think I can. I'm going to do it as a private investor, not as a TTF. And I think there needs to be a diagram that shows a whole bunch of people up here, 500,000 investors, of which only 300,000 can vote, and how that's made up. 300,000 going down to how many voted, and then do a link back to this little circle of people here against 500,000 and 300,000. So they've got to give us, they've got to make sure, the court's got to make sure they don't accept exactly what's been written on the page. It needs to show how many actual votes there were there any block voting? If they were, how many were they? So Quilter was 500 or 1,000 or whatever it was. So we can actually see the makeup of it, and it needs to be provided before the sanction meeting so we can react to it and have a look at it. I must admit, personally, I was dumbfounded with the outcome, really disappointed. And I know there are a number of people that may be on this call who tried to vote but gave up or couldn't register because they found it too difficult. So I think the whole thing being a crock of shit.
We've lost sound, Alan. Oh, Alan's frozen.
Am I?
I'll tell you what, Alan is frozen at the minute. We'll come back to Alan when he unfreezes. We'll go to Ian Duffield in a moment. I know you're sorted now. Carry on, Alan. Thank you.
I'm walking upstairs. The signal might be better up here. So where did you lose me?
I
didn't.
So many ways to answer that. We lost you when we lost you just about 20 seconds ago. That's all.
Yeah. So all I said is they need to provide information pre-sanction meeting showing a breakdown of the votes and if there are any block votes, where they were from, so the judge and the Chancery Court can understand what they're actually looking at rather than just percentages.
Right. Thank you. Rob's just put a note in the chat. He didn't lose you, so it's probably a signal thing at my end, not yours. Okay, thank you.
It's also, I mean, I did attend the meeting, and that's the other thing is, I don't know if anybody spotted it, but we got 2 emails prior to the event. One telling us it was going to happen, starting at 10 o'clock. The second one said, "Here's your login passcode, and it will start at 10 o'clock."
Yeah.
What they didn't say is when it was going to end. So if somebody decided, "Oh, I'm busy in the morning, I can't get the time off work, I'll vote in the afternoon." If they tried to get in, I think after 1 o'clock or thereabouts, it was closed. So you couldn't vote. So the meeting should have been, okay, the meeting happens, we've got questions, we'll stop. But the voting should have still been active all day. And that needs to be brought to the court's attention, that there could have been, a number of people. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many people actually voted during the meeting, in addition to the 53,700 that they had before the meeting started. So I've taken enough time. Thank you very much. And I'll take off self-mute.
Alan, thank you very much for your contribution. As always, really, really helpful. Really, really helpful. We'll go to Ian Duffield next. Then we'll go to Mark Bishop. Mark Bishop just put a phrase in the chat that I think might be a phrase we end up using quite a bit. Mark Bishop says, "I agree with Alan. It's a denominator cheat." I know Mark will explain what he means by that shortly. Please do, Mark. Mr. Ian Duffield, share your thoughts, please, about the outcome of the vote. Thank you. Ian, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Very briefly, I think the freeze might have been at your end because I think the rest of us were okay with Alan. So, okay. Again, on a similar vein, just an observation on the percentages, and again, absolutely agreeing with what Alan has said. In very, very crude round numbers, 50,000+ voted, and votes for against were less than 10%, which is less than 6,000. Now, I'm mindful that Harcus Parker, for certain, I know, were advising their clients to vote against. I don't know how many they had. Certainly, Lee Day were voting their client, were telling their clients to vote for, and I think I've seen numbers around suggesting they were 15,000 clients. I don't know if I have that number wrong. I'd be interested how many clients RGL have in this and what they actually recommended, if they did, their clients to vote. But one thing is clear in this, out of the people who were taking advice, certainly from Harcus Parker, plus the people who we know were strongly against this, me for one, who wasn't with Harcus Parker, then it's clear that a very, very low percentage of the people either on their own volition or taking the advice from the insurers or insurance company, the solicitors who they were with for the litigation going. It's a very, very low against vote. My own view on this is I think this reflects the default general public position in all matters of this case, which is apathy, given the fact that this issue has been going on for so long. And that is an issue that substantially sits with the FCA. So I think what we're seeing here is people have just given up. And that is usually, I mean, you only need to look at public inquiries into things that unless you are very, very, if you'll excuse the pun, heavily invested in the issue, after 3-4 years, it ceases to become of interest. You can look at the Hillsborough inquiry, you can look at the fire that resulted in the flats due to faulty cladding. And unless you were a flat owner or you were at the Hillsborough match or a relative of somebody at the Hillsborough match, we're not interested anymore. That is a default public position. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And I say substantially, my view is this sits with the FCA spending 4 years. And the other thing I find appalling is they'll release the report if the scheme is approved. That suggests the report is written. And why are they not releasing it before the scheme approval? Because surely that report is key in what people should be understanding about what it is has gone wrong. How accurate the report is, I don't know. But to be sitting on a report where the implication is completed until after a crucial vote, to me, is just one more issue that we're facing in dealing with the FCA.
Thanks very much, Ian. And what you've set out to my mind is several of the key points in the long list of points that, if you like, all come under the banner. It just hasn't been fair. You know, it just hasn't been fair. These are very, very important points. They may or may not have much weight from a legal point of view, but they do matter. They are true. They are real. And I guess the court of public opinion is important too. Mr. Ian Duffield, thank you very much. Could I please invite Mark Bishop to comment on the outcome of the vote? And Mark, you said something to me earlier, was it today or yesterday, that I found really interesting to do with the, well, please do just share what you thought. Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing to say is I agree with Alan about the percentage issue. It's something which is a rhetorical value when we get to the sanction hearing, and also something that matters in terms of the media reporting. And I'm aware that we have Arjun from the FT on this call, and it's this. The FCA and Link will say, oh yeah, 94% voted for this scheme. And absolutely right, it's 94% of those who voted. The fact is that actually, 82% of the creditors chose not to vote, weren't aware that there was a vote. So actually, the biggest vote was for apathy, and then there was a vote for the scheme. Am I surprised that of those who participated in the vote, the vast majority were for the scheme? No, because if I were one of them, if the only thing I had seen was the communication from Link and perhaps the FCA's website, I would have voted for the scheme. Because you look at it this way, the investor advocate, who you're told is independent, is for the scheme. The investor committee, whose chair you're told is independent, voted for the scheme. You also got the FCA strongly in favour of the scheme. And you've also got information there in the explanatory statement that says this is the quickest and surest way of getting redress. If you were to go down the route of restitution order, you get only slightly more, and there's a lot of risk attached to it. We don't even know if the FSCS would honour it. If you went down a litigation route, it could take years, and you don't know what you would get. And you've even got the FCA's enforcement director out there saying that the amounts that are being quoted as redress by the law firms as significantly or grossly exaggerated or inflated. So I would have voted as they did if that's all I'd seen. Thankfully, we do have available to us what's known by economists as a natural experiment. A natural experiment is where one group of people is given an opportunity to behave differently because circumstances are arranged differently for them, not because of the will of a researcher, but because of fate. And the natural experiment is that there are two groups of people who were given more and better information than the average creditor, and those are us lot at Transparency Task Force and a group of members of ShareSoc. And of those, the people at Transparency Task Force were given more information. So from memory, the people who saw the additional information, events, newsletters, etc. from ShareSoc voted 75%. They indicated 75% of them, they would vote against the scheme. At Transparency Task Force, 82% against the scheme. So one of the arguments that I hope can be raised at the sanction hearing is, if you do give people better information, particularly about the counterfactuals, the alternatives to the redress scheme, you see that most people don't want the redress scheme. Now, this then brings me into what Ian was saying. So Ian was saying, isn't it appalling that we're 4.5 years in and the FCA hasn't published its even draft decision notice about Link? That's absolutely true. And the worry is that we know that it's ready and we'll only get to see it once the sanction, once the scheme is implemented. Also, you've got something like 100, maybe a bit more, complaints about Link that have been with the FCA, some of them from, no, with the FOS, the Financial Ombudsman Service, for multiple years. Those have not been determined. The reason why they've not been determined is that unfortunately the Ombudsman is not independent from the FCA. It appoints, the FCA appoints their directors and also provides their budget, sets their budget. And also there is a gateway whereby if the FCA is doing a live investigation, it can basically instruct the Ombudsman not to investigate, to pause its determinations until the outcome of the investigation. So by dragging out its investigation for 4.5 years, the FCA has been able to prevent FOS determinations. Now, of course, if the first FOS determination was Mrs. Smith from Cheltenham, and they say, thank you, Mrs. Smith, you did lose the money that you claimed, not just because you were gated at the end, but because of malinvestment that happened during the life of the fund. Here is your losses back in full. Then Mrs. Smith would soon have been joined by, Mr. Brown from, Clackmannanshire and, somebody else from somewhere else. There would have been a whole load of them. The floodgates would have opened. So actually, there would be no need for litigation. There would be no need for a restitution order, or indeed for this redress scheme. The matter would have been resolved in that way. So we find ourselves in a horrible position where effectively, a firm and its regulator have worked together to prevent the victims from getting the full redress that they're owed. And I hope that one of the arguments that we brought, particularly by, as we call them, the Isle of Man 2, which is Hock Chan and Damien Falkowski, who are a solicitor and a barrister respectively, based in the Isle of Man, who are going to help Transparency Task Force on a no-fee kind of pro bono basis. They will be putting the argument that effectively the intent of this scheme and the effect of this scheme is to deprive the victims of their rights to go to the Financial Ombudsman Service and Financial Services Compensation Scheme. The third thing, which I think is quite crucial here, is the argument that if the scheme passes, because just under 54,000 people voted for it, about 52,500 people voted for it. Because of that number of people, 300,000 people will be unable not only to get those forms of redress I've described, but also to get redress from other parties. So these could be Woodford Investment Management, Hargreaves Lansdown, the Northern Trust, the Security Depository, because all that would need to happen is that they would say, if any attempt was made to sue them, they would say, well, actually, maybe we did do a bad thing, but these nasty people at Link didn't try and stop us, which they should have done. It was their job to try and stop us. What it's called is a contribution claim. They would say these people are partly responsible. Now, if the scheme goes through, every one of the investors, whether they voted against it or didn't vote at all or voted for it, all of those people will lose the rights to effectively any redress from Link. So all that needs to happen if they go against any of the other parties is that they say Link is partly to blame, and then all of the investors become at risk of adverse costs as a result of that claim, because they will be pursuing the claim, or a claim will be pursued after all of the creditors waived their rights. So you can see how that's a horrible situation. Literally, you know, a firm could come to you, Link could come to you and say, you know, a bunch of, you know, angry bastards tried to sue, I don't know, Northern Trust. And because of that and our legal costs, here is your share of our legal bill. That's an appalling situation. How many people realize that actually a bunch of people have signed them up to a liability that they weren't aware of? It's ridiculous. So that's the mess that we're in. So effectively, I hope that the sanction hearing, 3 lots of arguments we brought. The first is that there was incomplete and poor information. The second is that there is an intent to deprive you of statutory rights. And the third is that you will also be deprived of the opportunity to claim against other parties.
Mark, as always, thank you so much for your crystal clear explanation of things. It's always really, really valuable. Anybody else in the Woodford 10 like to come in talking about the outcome of the vote before we move on to the next part of our agenda? I'm going to go to gallery view so I can see hands waving if there are any. We've got quite a few people here today. Go for it, Alan. Go on.
Did you see my comment? So I heard Ian say about it. So there were 7,000 people with Parker's Parker, and less than 4,000 people have voted no. So there's something a bit wrong here. Either a lot of people couldn't get in and couldn't vote, or just gave up. And that's just Harker's Parker saying, please vote no. Yeah.
So 7,000 Harker's Parker folk were advised to vote no by their legal representatives.
Yeah.
And only a small percentage of them actually did.
Yes, because only 4,000 people voted no, and I voted no, and a number of people in the school voted no. So there's something not quite right. Either, you know, Harker's Parker, if I was Harker's Parker, I'd be sending an email out to the 7,000 people.
Did you vote?
And asking them just anonymously, how did you vote, and see what comes back.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is really interesting. Alan, thank you very much, Pete. Anybody else in the Woodford 10 want to talk about the outcome of the vote before we move on to the next part of our agenda? Please wave at me. I'm Mr. Graham Dickinson. Then we'll go to Deborah. Graham, then Deborah. Thank you. I can see you both. Cheers, Graham. You might be on mute.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll try and keep it brief then. Very much agree with what's already been said. You may not have seen it yet, but I have just emailed over some text of a response that I made to the FT Advisor article about the result, which, as others have pointed out, it just talks about the percentage of investors. And so I've said, well, the counter argument to that is that it's the percentage of less than a fifth of a low estimate of the number of investors eligible. And then I've gone a bit further and said, actually, when you look at the numbers that have voted, the 54,000, I'm not sure actually what our 2 groups comprise in numbers, but I've seen numbers of around 900 talked about. So I've said, if you look at the people who are closely engaged and better informed, maybe up to 1,000 people, that's only 2% of the people that voted. So it's picking up on what Mark has just said, really, that you can come back on those numbers. It does look like a foregone conclusion, and I would have to say, if the entirety of the investors, all 300,000 plus, voted 97% for it, we might be a bit unjustified in trying to oppose it if it obviously suits the majority. And I'm not sure that we are there. The vast majority probably aren't engaged in this in any meaningful way. Of the ones that voted, maybe 2% have seen enough. And where they've seen enough, they've made a completely opposite conclusion, and most have voted against it. So I think that's really something we need to get into these articles. The press reporting is quite lazy, as always. It picks up on the statements with the headline figures, and we need to fight that and make the counter argument, really.
Right, thank you very much indeed. With Deborah's permission, I'm going to go to Mark because he put his hand up whilst Graham was speaking. So I've got a feeling Mark might want to say something that is triggered from what Graham just said. Mark, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to just come in on something that he said and also that I've seen in the chat. I mean, it's just concerning that AJ Bell appears to have told people that no action was required.
So that
However,
again. Say that again. But no
so
action.
there are two people in the chat who said that AJ Bell messaged their customers to say that no action was required. Now, that is unfortunate, but I just want to say from a tactical viewpoint, I don't have a view personally, I'm not a lawyer, but it's not my view that there is a great deal of mileage in talking about any procedural flaws with the voting. And the reason why I say that is the margin by which the vote went for the scheme is so large, and there is no reason to believe that those who didn't vote were disproportionately on one side of the equation, that it would have resulted in a different outcome. So personally, I think we would be spending a lot of time arguing about something that's inconsequential. The things that are consequential are about the errors and omissions in what information people voted on. You know, our argument should be people would not have voted the way they did if they had known the full facts. So the people who didn't vote might well have voted against the scheme, and the people who voted for the scheme, many of them might well have voted against it. I think that that's where the fruitful arguments are. Our natural experiment, in fact, 2 natural experiments, are supportive of that theory. And also, there is legal opinion we know about the contribution claim argument and about the effect of the scheme disapplying statutory rights. Those are very strong arguments. And we also have extensive correspondence with Clifford Chance, the lawyers for Link, with the FCA, with the court, everybody we could get hold of, which was us trying to say, you know, this scheme documentation, the FCA statements, they're misleading and there are material omissions.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. I wish I could somehow splice a little bit of your brain to mine. Deborah Clark, one of the very, very helpful members of the Woodford 10. Please share your thoughts. Thank you, Deborah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was pretty astounded by the vote and how high it was. I think it's really important to get the statistics of the votes that were cast and a breakdown of it, because, for example, if you see adverts on the TV for beauty products, they say 9 out of 10 people said this was fantastic. And if you look in the print underneath, it says only 100 people were canvassed. So therefore you can skew, with percentages, you can make it look like it's a really, really great thing, and it's not. So I think that does need to be looked at, not dwelled upon, because I think Mark is right. It is such a high percentage that's done. We need to move on and find some strategy. I felt that in this meeting, I was like, oh my God, are we the only ones here and the people that were organizing it? Because it just seemed, I typed in a question thinking this will never get on, and it was the first one up, and it was like, excuse me, really? So how many people were actually at the meeting?
Yeah.
No idea.
Well, you know what, Deborah, as always, you so beautifully sort of sum things up nicely. I'll tell you what, I tell you, there's one question I'd love to ask everybody who voted for the scheme. The question's this: do you think you're going to get 77 pence in the pound back on what you invested?
Well, that's another thing.
I reckon a high proportion to say, yeah, that's what they said, isn't it?
I think if you think, and as I did, I used to think, oh, well, I've spent so much. If I'm going to get 77p in the pound, that's quite a lot of money back. When they actually get what they're due, when all the maths are worked out, I think there's going to be a lot of very, very, very unhappy and disgusted people. I'll leave it at that.
I think that's a really interesting point. I wonder if there's somehow we could get I wonder if we can get, let's say for argument's sake, the FT or one of the other quality newspapers, Arjun, to do a poll type thing. Anyway, We'll come back to that. We're now going to go back to Mr. Ian Duffield, who's had his hand back, and then we'll go to anybody else in Woodford 10. Then we're going to quickly move on. We've got quite a bit to get through. Mr. Duffield.
Right, thank you, Andy. Just very quickly, Andrew Streeter, you've just taken the words out of my mouth with lies, damn lies and statistics. Very, very quickly, I know time is pressing. My experience with AJ Bell in response to Derek Moore's comment was exactly the same. First response from them was, there's nothing to bother about. I then had to send them an extract from the scheme of arrangement defining exactly who is entitled to vote. And it's not them, it's me. Which was said, oh, we'll refer it on to somebody. Still nothing. And after 3 emails, the last one saying urgent and being very, very strongly worded to tell them they'd better get their finger out or else, before I then got a promise of an evidence of holding, which subsequently took several days to come. And that was with AJ Bell. I know AJ Bell were up to speed with generally the Woodford scandal because I had a conversation with their managing director very soon after the scandal took place as to the issue about Hargreaves Lansdowne promoting Woodford. And his comment was, we would have nothing to do with him being Woodford because everybody knows what he was up to. And that comment from a platform that sometime later down the line is saying, don't bother. You know, and this is the underpin of that, that even the experts, the platforms such as AJ Bell, even their staff didn't really understand what was going on. And that's the extent of the problem here in disinformation and lack of information.
Ian, thanks again very much indeed. We're going to go to Mr. Peter Glass. Peter, thank you for raising your hand and being here. Please do take a moment to share your thought. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I mean, look, I'll try and make these points really quick. So the issue that Mark raised a few minutes ago about procedural matters, I don't think there's any mileage in trying to examine and take anything forward on that basis. I think, you know, the procedure was what it was, and that's kind of left there. With regards to the numbers of people voting, I think the issue for me is that this has gone on for so long, but there's a lot of people out there that are just completely apathetic about it. And I think there's probably a lot of people that were just resigned to, you know, well, if I get something back, you know, then all well and good. I don't really expect anything. So they kind of forgotten about it. The thing for me is, as this has rolled on, right, this all started, I think, for most of us about Woodford and obviously our perception of injustice. As this has rolled forward, and I thank, you know, to you and the more learned people that I've met through these calls, there is something much, much bigger at play here. And I think we'd all agree about that. It's not only about the ineptitude and, you know, the negligence, however you want to frame it, about the FCA. It is about the whole transparency of the system, and it sucks. We know that. So I think that is something that is hopefully going to continue the momentum and gather more momentum as we go forward. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, wider and now for the greater good. I know this is slightly off subject. So that's one thing. Another thing, and the other thing I just wanted to. So I don't know. I suspect many of you were on the call and listening in the other morning. I kind of sat there and did smile when the question was being asked about the valuation. So at the time of closure, 3.6 billion, 2.6 or thereabouts returned to investors. The proposal goes up to 230 million. So what happened to the other 700 million, you know? And it was one of those sort of moments when papers probably got ruffled and it's like, we'll move on quickly. And I was just surprised that nobody picked up on that further and you know, asked the questions that should be asked. So sorry, Mark, there's a number of points in there, but I just wanted to, share them really. Thanks.
Peter, thank you very much for taking the time to do so. That's great. Does anybody else want to quickly come in before we move on to the next part of the agenda? Just talking very, very briefly about the outcomes. I think we're good to move on. Oh, Suresh, please make it as short as you can, Suresh. You've got up to...
I will. I think the 77p seems to include all the various distributions that we've received. These guys are only going to give us between 6 and 7p at the most. And that is after PwC and everybody else will have had a huge chunk taken away from that.
Yeah.
So really, the people have voted, but I don't think they knew they were only going to get 6 or 7p, or if they didn't pay any attention to it.
Yeah, I get it. I absolutely get what you're saying. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're going to move to the next part of the agenda. I'm going to talk about the impact statements, and then I'm going to talk about the video interview schedule. So let me just make sure I get the right screen open here. I think this one will be. So many of you have very kindly contributed to an exercise, which is where we capture your thoughts of impact statements. What you're looking at is a spreadsheet where responses have been put. And I'm first of all just going to recap what the questions were. So what was your name? What's your email address? Which type of investment did you have in WAIF, however you pronounce that? Why did you invest in the Woodford fund stroke arrangement? If relevant, what investment platform did you use? What else? How has the Woodford scandal impacted you stroke your family? That's a very, very important question. How has the scandal impacted you stroke your family? What do you think about how the FCA has handled matters? What did you like, if anything, about the proposed scheme arrangement? What do you dislike, if anything? Number 10, what are your thoughts about the voting process? 11, would you like to also express your thoughts in a short Zoom video interview recording with me? That would be put online. 12, are you comfortable talking to a journalist? If your answer to the above about the journalist is yes, what's your postcode? That's so we can match them with local media. Number 14, who's your MP? Number 15, anything else? And very, very thankfully, lots of people completed that impact questionnaire. And the column L, which is the column I'm showing you now, would you be happy to do a video interview? Some people are, some people aren't. We got quite a few yeses, right? We got quite a few yeses. Now, what we're going to be doing next week is those video interviews. And what I'm going to share with you now is the schedule we're using, not that one, the schedule we are using to manage that. I'll stop sharing first of all to make sure I share with you the right thing. There it is, lovely. So bear with me. Share. Again. So here we go. This is the video interview schedule. So column A is about the times available on Monday. That's Monday next week, this coming Monday. 12 o'clock, 12:20, 12:40, 1:20, etc. through to 3:40 being the last one. So what we're looking to do is up to 3 video interviews per hour. They'll be short, they'll be pretty succinct, and they'll be very straightforward. Essentially what will happen is you'll click on the Zoom link, as it happens, the same one you've used for today's event, and you'll come on and I'll ask you the questions on Zoom and your answers will be used for the video interview. Very simple, very, very straightforward. So Monday's sessions start at 12 o'clock and the last one available is 3:40. None on Tuesday. Wednesday, we've got 12 through till 3 p.m. The last one being 2:40. Thursday, we've got 6 a.m., 6:20, 6:40. I've stuffed up there, I'll fix that in a minute. And then 7, 7:20, 7:40, 8, 8:20, 8:40, 9, 9:40, through to I think 11 o'clock. So we're going to circulate a link to this schedule. If anybody wants to do a video interview, you need to put your name in the relevant field so that I know who's going to be coming at what times. It's very, very simple. You just need to put your name in there, and that's basically it. Do that as quickly as you can. The quicker you do it, the more choice you're going to have over the slots available, because obviously as people put themselves on, there'll be fewer and fewer choices. You might be wondering, well, I didn't complete an impact statement, but I'd like to do this anyway. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. what are we going to do with the videos? We're going to use them to help build support in court, not the official court, but the court of public opinion. We're going to use those video interviews to carry the sentiment that many people think about what's been going on, as well as the questions in the impact statement questionnaire that I showed you. There are also going to be questions covering very contemporary issues. For example, you'll be aware that the Isle of Man 2, the two legal professionals who are very happily helping us, very gladly helping us on a completely pro bono basis, they've been building what we believe is a very strong, robust, coherent argument that in actual fact, what the FCA and Link are doing via this scheme of arrangement could actually be completely unlawful because they're taking away statutory rights. So there may well be a question there, a question in the interview. What do you think about the FOS and the Financial Ombudsman Service and the Financial Compensation Scheme? When you invested, what was your understanding about how it worked? Didn't you read paragraph 34 of the prospectus? If so, what did you understand it to mean when it said blah, 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 blah? That kind of stuff. Over the weekend, I'll probably knock up the questions, circulate them, so you'll know what questions are going to be asked. Before we move on, let me just check in. Does anybody have any questions or comments in relation to what I've just said? Just wave something at me if you do. Otherwise, we're going to move on.
Andy, just
yes, please,
one comment. The FCA is now looking at Hargreaves Lansdown. They have now started their investigation after all these years.
Okay.
So, they go to sleep and then somewhere along there, somebody kicks them and they wake up 6 years later.
Okay. Something's made you say that, Suresh. So whatever it was it a newspaper article or something? Can you put a link in to it in the chat so we can all take a look?
Yeah, no, I received a letter from them, an email.
From who? From Hargreaves Lansdown?
No, from FCA, that they have now started the investigation.
Right, okay. Can you please forward that email to me and I'll circulate it amongst the Woodford 10. There could be a bit of gamesmanship going on. Thank you for letting us know, Suresh, but you've got my email address, yeah?
Yeah.
So send it to me now. I want to take a look at it whilst this chat's happening. We're going to go to Ian Duffield and put his hand back up before we move on to our next part of the agenda. Ian, thank you.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the chat, there's a very good comment there from Lisa Harness, signed 1550, and it looks like she's actually copied the contents of that letter that's just been talked about.
Thank you very much indeed.
Very interesting, and just another thing, maybe somebody has shot the bolt a bit early here, because although this scheme has been voted for, it's not yet gone through the sanction hearing, and the timing is really interesting here, where we're talking literally, within 48 hours, just about enough time to get the letter out after the vote, appearing to look like the scheme of arrangement has been voted for, but there's a stretch to go yet.
Okay, now this is very interesting. For those of you that weren't in the meeting when Lisa popped that very, very, very helpful note in the chat, I've copy pasted it and I've put it back in again. So please have a look while we're going through that. Lisa, thank you very much indeed. That's going to be very interesting. My natural instinct is to wonder if there's a bit of tactical manoeuvring here by the FCA. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda. Can I go around the Woodford 10 for any other business that they would like to raise? We'll then go to the Isle of Man 2 to see if they'd like to make any comments, and then we'll kind of open things up a little bit. So Woodford 10, please wave if you want to say something. Thank you. We're going to go to Alan, then to Deborah first of all. Alan, then Deborah. Thank you.
I'm just saying what Lisa said. It's actually from the Financial Ombudsman, not the FCA.
Right.
So it's from FOS, is it not? Maybe Lisa can confirm that in the text. Is it from the FCA or is it from the Financial Ombudsman, as in FOS?
Please do let us know, Lisa. That's really important.
Sorry to cut across, Andy. It says it's from FOS at the top.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Yes, we could hear you. Please carry on.
So sorry, I'm on a train. I've got headphones on a train, so it's might break. up. Yeah, it's from the Financial Ombudsman. It's to a complaint. My husband received it on Friday and I received it yesterday, exactly the same email. It was a lot longer than that, but that's the opening bit of it.
Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your input, Lisa, and have a good rest of your train journey. Can anybody who's received that email send it to me or any of the others in the Woodford 10 ASAP so we can look at the whole thing and try to get heads around what's going on and why the timing has been what it is. Mr. Hock Chan, please do come in. And for those of you that don't know, Hock is one of the Isle of Man 2. Before we do anything else, let's once again show our appreciation to the Isle of Man 2. Please do put your hands together. These guys are very, very expensive, very, very good legal professionals. Hock's now retired, who are doing everything they're doing for us completely free, no strings attached, no percentage. Hock, please do share your thoughts. Thank you. You're on mute though, Hock.
Hi, Andy. So just keeping my polite mute going. I did circulate a short message on the W10 WhatsApp group earlier, okay, which deals with this issue about FOS and Hargreaves Lansdown.
Right.
I think everyone just needs to be a little bit careful about that, where claims management companies are coming around trying to sign people up at this particular moment in time when everyone's probably a little bit stressed about things. My message is, you got plenty of time, guys. So there's 6 years to bring a claim under FOS from, so you still got a few years yet. So if you want to make those decisions to go to FOS, make them with a cool head in your own time. And secondly, before you consider going to FOS, it is very clear that if you can, everyone can search the FOS website for decisions, and there are 11 decisions regarding Hargreaves Lansdown since 2019, which relate to Woodford investments. Because this is all about Hargreaves Lansdown acting as an agent or an advisor and whether they have breached their duties as advisors to their clients. And just beware, out of the 11, 9 have not been upheld. So only 2 FOS decisions against Hargreaves Lansdown have been decided in favour of the clients. And therefore, Damien and I aren't involved in everyone's individual circumstances, and there's no way we could ever be. But what I would urge everyone to do is to go and take a look at that. I put the link on the W10 chat, and decide for yourselves whether those decisions actually match your circumstances, which will then inform you whether you've likely got a claim against Hargreaves Lansdown when you go to FOS, or any other, or if you commence or join any group of litigation against them.
Hock, thank you very much indeed. Hock, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to come back to you, please, sir, to talk about the importance of the loss figures. You know, the formula that we've been talking about. I'll explain it a little bit, and you can finish off the explanation if that's okay in about 5 minutes. Thank you, Hock. Thank you, Mr. Mark Bishop.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it would be interesting. I don't know whether Hock's done this, but if not, whether maybe someone in Woodford 10 could have a look at those 11 determinations and work out what separates the 2 that found in the favour of the complainant from the 11 that didn't. It's probably quite important to find that out. For example, Hargreaves Lansdown has a discretionary wealth management division, and it has a financial advice division. Is it the case that those, one or both of those, are the ones that have given rise to claims that were upheld, whereas those who simply invested because of the Wealth 150, what it's called, the list of recommended funds, whether those were found against? I don't know the answer. I'm speculating here. It would be useful to have clarity about it. I'm a great cynic here, and it seems to me that what the FCA is probably trying to do is to get the FOS to kill as many of the complaints as possible about Hargreaves Lansdown now, just in case the scheme is overturned. And maybe the reason is, or actually, before the scheme is approved, it seems the scheme will be approved, And I suspect the reason for this is once a scheme is approved, then people will not litigate against that firm because they know that there'll be a risk of adverse costs. And that's because of the contribution claim issue that's already been raised.
That's fascinating, Mark. That's fascinating. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Alan Pyatt has put the link in the chat that Hock just referred to about the FOS cases. And can one of you guys, the sort of brain that I haven't got, do what Mark just said? Try to distill down what it was about the two that won that's different to the 9, I think it was, that didn't. That would be really useful. Anybody else from the Woodford 10 want to come in at this point before we go to the next part of our agenda, which is me talking about why it's really important to get calculation of loss figures. Mr. Ian Duffield, thank you.
Yeah, I'll start taking a look at those over the weekend.
Good man.
I've got some little bit of a background in contract matters, so I'll have a look and try and come back to the Woodford 10 as quickly as I can.
Yeah, and please circulate that, including to Hock and Damien, because it may be there's bits in there that actually need to go into the legal process that the guys are working on. Thanks, Ian. That would be super duper.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
Okay, so I'm now going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the idea that we gather information about how much people have lost. This is an idea that's come from the Isle of Man too. Basically, what we want to do is show the court how much people are likely to get through the scheme of arrangements compared to how much they're likely to get if they had a successful FOS claim. And we've come up with a questionnaire which, if people answer the questions accurately, will give us the information that we want. We want as many as possible people, we want as many people as possible, we want as many people as possible to complete the questionnaire so we can give Hock and Damien, the Isle of Man 2, as many good examples to cherry pick from for the purposes of the information of the court. That's my plain English explanation. Hock, can you just turn the garbage I just set out into decent English? Thank you.
Okay. So when Damien and I are putting together the presentation to the court, we will be wanting to show that there's a disparity between the compensation that's being offered under the scheme for individual investors versus what we think that they would receive under a FOS award. I know that some people within the group have already signed up to some of the litigation action groups, which have led to particulars of claim being issued. But the difference between FOS and formal court litigation is there's a much higher standard required and much more formal process that goes through in establishing what the loss is that you want to recover in a court case. So in the situation that you've got here, which is the value of money, the value of investments goes up and down, people entered and exited the fund at different times, they had different investment parameters, they had different, everyone's got their own individual personal circumstances, which means getting to a precise number to say, I would have had this amount of money, but for what these guys did, is a very hard thing for Harkus, Parker, Leyday, and all these other lawyers to get over the line. And it will require a huge amount of expert evidence. I'm not interested in any of that. So let's be absolutely clear. We are not doing a forensic legal analysis. What we are going to do is we're going to do a quick and dirty, because all we need to do is show to the court, for the purposes of the fairness of the scheme of arrangement, to show that the scheme of arrangement number is an unfair number. It doesn't matter whether the real number of loss is a totally accurate number. It just needs to show the general ballpark. And in coming to the general ballpark number, there are a number, if you go back onto that same FOS website and change the search it slightly to Woodford over the same period from 2019 to date, you'll find about 42 or 43 cases where there are IFAs, typically all of them, IFAs or SIP providers who have been complained about for holding Woodford shares. The majority of them have not been successful. For instance, because holding Woodford shares was within the general corporate investment portfolio objectives. But the cases where people have been successful, where the IFA or whatever failed to undertake a regular review that they should have done, or things like that, in which case Woodford would have been picked up and sold at a much earlier date. What the FOS has actually done is it's followed its much more gentle and wide-ranging powers, which are to say, well, what do we have to do to make things right? And that's their test, how to make things right. And if you read any of those decisions by FOS, it's a common theme. It's part of their process. And in making things right, they assess what is fair compensation. And fair compensation in the cases where they have awarded damages in relation to Woodford Holdings is they've gone on say on 1st of June 2017, you put £10,000 into Woodford. What we'll do is we'll apply an index that we have chosen as FOS and apply that to the investment, and therefore your investment should be worth, say, £12,000 as at today. In the Woodford situation, you might have received, say, £6,000 in return. So your damages, your fair compensation is £6,000. And it's no more complicated than that. And what it does, it gives us a broad range. But the beauty of running this argument is we can actually base it on what FOS has already decided in a number of cases. So it's really hard for the other side to pick bones with it. And all we're doing, if we all keep this in mind, all we're doing is trying to show the disparity between what the scheme gives you and what we think in ballpark terms FOS would give us. And once we've got what we think FOS would give us, that also unlocks access to the financial services compensation scheme in the event of Link becoming insolvent, because that is the quantum of civil liability that we can point to and say that that is the amount of money that should be recovered by customers.
Well, thank you very much. That's all absolutely.
Sorry, that's a slightly longer explanation, Andy, than you probably thought.
No, that's perfect. And I've just kind of tried to capture the key points in the chat there. So, folks, over the weekend, expect an email probably from me that says, please spend however long, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, filling in this standard questionnaire that we produced to capture the information we need to give us the case studies. And I think I'm right in saying, Hock, the difference on the ones we've seen so far is enormous. We're not talking like little bits of money difference. Hock, do you remember roughly what those numbers were in the case we've seen so far?
It's plus or minus. It depends on how long people have been invested in the fund.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a factor of 10.
So what Hock's saying here is, based on this quick and dirty, non-forensic, tokenistic litmus test approach, the FOS compensation could be something like 10 times more than what the compensation would be through the scheme of arrangement. Okay, a substantial difference. Suresh is nodding his head. It seems to be on the same wavelength. I think Mark's done the figures as well, and everybody's realising just how big a difference it is. One way of cynically looking at this is, if the FCA get their way, the total compensation bill is going to be about 1/10 of what would actually be the case, according to what Parliament wanted when they set up the Financial Ombudsman Service and the FSCS. That's why this battle is worth fighting for. Not only are we fighting this battle, picking up on a point that some other folks mentioned earlier today, there's a bigger picture here. I think Peter Glass touched on this. You know, the bigger picture here is consumers have consumer rights. They were fought for to be achieved in the first place. And if they're being taken away through some devious process, then we need to stand up and fight against that. It's time to stand up, not stand by. In a moment, I'm going to ask Damien, Mr. Damien Falkowski, if he's with us, I think he is, to comment in very, very succinct terms around what the basis of the legal argument is around why it's not appropriate for the scheme of arrangement to denude the statutory protections. Before we do that, though, we're going to go to Mr. Ian Duffield, who's going to very quickly share his thought. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, we're coming through okay?
Yep, you are.
Yeah,
yep.
Very quickly, just to underpin the importance of what you just said, Andy. I started that piece of work today on mine and my wife's holdings in respect of the FTSE Private Investor Index. I'm not absolutely sure I've got my numbers right, but I'm sure Alan may be so kind to just double check them when I've done the job piece of work and send them to him. But the number is under the scheme of arrangement. I've started on my wife's first because hers is easier. My wife would receive £1,300 using the FTSE. I'll call the term an uplift, but the actual loss, if done through the mechanism that Hock originally suggested, we're talking just over 17,000. So that's the difference. In my wife's case, we're talking well in excess of the 10% that Hock has suggested. We're talking a figure of more like 14-15%. That's the scale of the difference.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. We'll go to Damien Falkowski if he's available to share his thoughts. He may or may not want to do so. There's good reasons why he might or might not. Entirely his call. Damien, if you'd like to speak, please do take yourself off mute. And Katie Halford from RGL, you will have an opportunity after Damien's spoken if you wish to very briefly introduce yourself and share any thoughts you have. Damien, would like to speak, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andy. I wasn't anticipating speaking. I was just listening in with great interest to what an excellent job, if I may say so, everyone is doing under Andy's excellent chairmanship. And I think when question time comes up on BBC One, if Fiona Bruce decides to concentrate on antiques, then Andy's your man. I'm going to make my little presentation to you very, very brief and tell you what I'm going to very briefly say on the 18th of January, which is, it's just a very simple point. Parliament has said, and let's make it simple, if you were a depositor in a bank, Parliament said, if the bank goes bust, you get your £85,000. That's the guarantee scheme. It gives you an absolute minimum. It doesn't say, oh, well, unless the court does a scheme of arrangement and you're outvoted and you are thereby deemed to have not had any dispute, or your loss is deemed to be something different. So we're going to be making the very simple point, which is that the rights of a retail investor, the right of the punter, the right of the consumer, and the banking analogy is easier because that's what everybody thinks about. It's the £85,000 guarantee point. The right of the consumer cannot be taken away by a statutory scheme under Part 26 of the Companies Act. And I'm going to make it as simple as that. It will be nice to have those examples backing up the point, because it's one thing to have a good argument in law, it's another if the judge thinks, oh, well, that's all very, very fancy argument, but who in their right mind would rather what Mr. Falkowski is arguing for than what is on the plate on offer? And what at the moment they seem to be driving home is this 77% point. And I think that's been described, what's the word? Not last man. It's what's the point called, Andy? It's the point that those investors.
Damien, it was the first mover advantage.
Okay, thank you. It's the first move advantage point. They seem to there has been, they referred to this first move advantage, which means those people who started getting their money out first had an unfair advantage compared to those people who were left in the illiquid position. Well, that's only 1 point. And so we will be saying that there's something far more fundamental than that. It's not just first mover point. Our various clients would have had the right to go to FOS. They would have. We will be showing by way of these examples, we will decide how to marshal and present this information. It doesn't need to be done in the same detail and depth as though one were presenting it as an actuarial report or a forensic accountancy exercise. But the thrust of the point will be to take some examples to say, Mr. A, under this scheme, and as Hock says, applying FOS's own analysis, because if you apply FOS's own analysis, then it can't be said, oh, well, that's a hypothetical way that you're adopting that wouldn't be adopted in reality. We'll say, this is reality. So we will present a number of cases to say that Mr. A, under the scheme, will get £2,000, whereas if he went to FOS, and his complaint was upheld, he would be awarded 20,000. And if Woodford then couldn't pay in an insolvency situation, he would have the right to apply to the FSCS for that instead. So I'll be making my points very succinct and simple, just a stark point, which is under the Companies Act Part 26, I submit that there is no right to take away the statutory rights that are enshrined in the FSMA, Financial Services and Markets Act. That'll be the point. Sorry for taking a little bit longer than perhaps necessary.
It's wonderful to hear such an experienced barrister put things across in such a succinct and clear way. We all understood that. It's a fantastic thought. And I'll tell you what, folks, isn't it remarkable that it's taken until Hock and Damon have turned up on the scene, acting pro bono for us, for this wonderfully elegant legal argument to be put across. Effectively, they're saying there is no basis in law for these rights to be taken away. I guess, presumably, in the same way that nobody could take my rights to free speech away, just willy-nilly. It's wonderful. Can I please invite everybody to once again put their hands together for the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Isle of Man 2. Well done, Damon. Well done, Hock. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Katie from RGL, please take a moment if you'd like to very, very briefly introduce yourself very briefly and share any key points you'd like to. Thank you, Katie, if you'd like to.
Hi, thanks very much for including me on this call. It's been really helpful to get see the opinions and everything. So that's been great. I won't go on. Some of you may know us at RGL. We are one of the claims management companies looking to help people. If anyone wants to reach out to us, I've put my contact details in the chat. I am more than happy to have a talk on the phone or email correspondence, whatever anyone likes. Everything, no obligation. We're very happy here to just have a chat and see what people think if you want any more information. So I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Katie, thank you. One really simple question. So what in law is, in a nutshell, is the, how can I put it this way? So Damon Parker from Harker's Parker circulated some thoughts about the idea that there wouldn't be a practical basis upon which people could go for the third-party folks such as Hargreaves or Northern Trust. And he sets out his kind of legal arguments for that and his practical arguments for that. In a nutshell, Katie, just a couple of sentences, in what way is he wrong?
I'm not the best place to answer that, to be honest. So we are going to be regrouping early next week and sending out an update to all of our registrants. So we'll be addressing some of those issues in those updates, but I'll be regrouping with our directors to pick up on those points and things that have been raised today. So it's been really helpful to be included on those.
Okay. Given what a massive interest issue it is for us, I'll pop yourself and your colleagues a note over the weekend. Please come back to us with a paragraph that explains what it basically is, if that's okay, Katie, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're talking again next week, aren't we, anyway? So yes, we can catch up on all those things. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Wonderful. And Katie, just in case you're not aware, what we're trying to do in TTF and Woodford Campaign Group land is to kind of collaborate supportively with all the law firms involved so that collectively we can be as impactful as possible on that all-important January the 18th. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for being here. A quick response to Anthony. Yes, you're welcome to join the meeting after this one, Anthony, at least for part of it. Okay. We're going to go to any other business. I can see Ian's got his hand up. It's wonderful how you contribute, Ian. Any other business from anybody else other than Ian before we go to Ian? So raise your hand, wave at me if you want to chip in with something. Oh, I can see a hand. I didn't see who it was. It's Mr. John Astle, I think. Yeah, John, please do share your thoughts. Thank you. You'll need to take yourself off mute first, please, though, John. Thank you.
Hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, sir.
I've just put a brief note on there. I'm part of the Lee Day Claimant Committee alongside Neil Taylor.
Right.
But I just wondered there, listening to some very interesting arguments, whether because we participated in that scheme via Lee Day, you know, could that be seen as a mistake, and would you therefore be barred from claiming through any other route, FOS and beyond? I did put a note on the chat there, but I was conscious we were getting near to the end of the meeting. I just wondered whether we were in any way denied access to these other routes, should they be what sound like very simple and very logical approaches to a resolution. And we've been going around in circles for 2 years with legal people who didn't seem to see the wood for the trees. And I don't mean the Woodford, I mean the wood for the trees.
I don't know if that was intentional. I thought that was great. I'll tell you, he's probably the best person here to answer that. It would be Neil, Mr. Neil Taylor. So you heard and understood John's question, no doubt. Is there any reason to think today claimants who are using Lee Day services might be unable to use FOS stroke FSCS in the eventuality that they might want to do so? Neil, any thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, well, let me explain my case, because when I first found out about Woodford, it was on the date of the suspension, believe it or not, because I was very low key, just ignoring everything, and just there's a lot of noise when things happen and you just ignore it. And that's only when you find out that it collapses that you start looking at things a bit stronger, and you obviously find out it was a basket case. But the point is Lee Day didn't come to or any of the legal companies didn't come to the table very quickly. And what I decided to do is I took it up a complaint with both Hargreaves and also Link Fund Solutions, particularly Link Fund Solutions. I wanted all the information out of them on the losses, and they wouldn't give it to me, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And so they gave me a final letter, and I sent 2 claims into FOS. So they're still lodged there, but they're suspended because Lee Day said you couldn't have any claims with other people at the time, but you could suspend them at that point. So we suspended them. I don't know whether you can reactivate them. That's
Neil,
the other question.
can I just
so I've got
intervene
to
for a
find
second?
that out.
Yeah,
Neil, if I may intervene for a second first.
Yeah.
Neil, could I see a copy of those false complaints that you filed, please? That is precisely what we have been looking for, and is the subject of Damien's letter, which we crafted together to Clifford Chance.
Yeah, I did that. I think I did that in 2020, about April, for both companies. And what happened is, because there was no progress on it, was just you just get reminder letters from the FOS saying we're considering it and not doing anything. They said we're going to appoint an investigator. It was November I joined the Lee Day one because it was just such a drag. There was nothing going on. So
see, this is where it gets very interesting, guys.
Go on.
I have done some research, because if anyone wants to have a little nose around the FOS website, and I've done quite a bit of that in my campaigning when we were taking down Indigo Michael Limited as a payday lender. You can go, if you go across the tabs at the very top, you can get to data. Okay, and every 6 months, FOS publishes its claims data. And this isn't anonymized, it's full name and shame. So I can turn around and see that Indigo Michael Limited in 1/2 of the year that I was pursuing had an 86% uphold rate and had received 232 or whatever complaints. Okay, I could see the number that HSBC have as well as the ones for Aviva and everyone else in the market. Every single claim that FOS has lodged with it should be reported in that claims data. The striking thing that I found that I couldn't correlate to the information given by Clifford Chance was in the FOS data, there are 0 complaints ever made against Link Fund Solutions since 2019. Amazing. And that's why I want to see Neil's thing, because there's something really odd going on here, how there can be 85 open cases when none of them appear on the FOS stats. And on the basis of open justice, FOS has all of its decisions on a searchable database, which is what I've asked you guys to go and look at. How I found 43 decisions regarding brokers and Woodford since 2019, and 11 specifically against Hargreaves Lansdown. You can search it. You can even use keyword searches. And there are 0 cases, decisions, which have the word Link Fund Solutions, or where Link Fund Solutions is the respondent company.
No, but there's lots for Link Financial Outsourcing Limited.
That's a different company. That is a claims management, a debt management company, which is a completely different operation. It's a European company, whereas Link Fund Services Solutions is part of an Australian group.
Yes. Did you read my chat note, Hock? It did say in the explanation letter, which Link Funder produced on page 27, it says there's 455 claims against Woodford. It says Woodford on that page 27, of which 104 relate to Link Fund Solutions. So the balance will probably relate to Hargreaves Lansdown, I suspect. So it could be 300 against Hargreaves and 104 for 350 for Hargreaves and about 104 for Link Fund Solutions. That's what they're saying in their explanation letter.
But that doesn't correlate to the FOS published data. So I would expect to have seen.
But they wouldn't have had outcomes yet because they would have been frozen.
Doesn't matter. It shows the number of complaints made and the number of complaints resolved.
Right.
Yes,
can I just go back to that question? I mean, I'm always very respectful of Neil's opinion on everything, as he knows. But I'd much rather, Neil, if you don't mind, that Hock maybe puts a comment in. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if I was being completely logical, Lee Day have not sued anybody. They've had lots of shadow boxing going on and lots of positioning statements going in. So have we actually deemed to have taken legal action? Because as far as I can see, nobody's ever got the gloves on in court, as far as I can see, in any real manner, apart from being told to work together as one claim with Harkus Parker. That really wasn't. That was a positioning situation for me, rather than somebody listening to the case for and the case against. So, can Hock maybe give us an opinion as to whether we are barred from following this FOS route? Because somebody else has commented on the chat that Lee Day look as if they've given up. I mean, you and I maybe not think that it's quite that bad just yet, but I think they're struggling in deep water, let's say.
If I can just respond briefly. First of all, it's not for me or Damien to comment on what is going on or not going on, or what is being done by other firms as solicitors with their clients. We don't, because we're not in the tent, as it were. So first of all, it wouldn't be proper for us to comment on other law firms and what they're doing or what they have done or the advice they've given to people. And that's something you need to take up directly with them. I am aware, because it was provided to us by Harkus Parker, that that particulars of claim have been issued and served by Harkus Parker and Lee Day against Link Fund Services.
Mhm.
The position of that litigation, I suspect, has been suspended for the time being, but for any updates, you need to go back to your solicitors, and I can't comment on that.
Okay.
Another thing I would say is there is a general principle of law that you cannot litigate the same issues in two tribunals at the same time. So if you have chosen already to litigate in Tribunal A, say the High Court or FOS, you cannot then at the same time bring separate proceedings for the same matters in a second tribunal. So you can't have your cake and eat it. And that is a general principle of law. But beyond that, I don't think it would be right for me to comment.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're going to wrap up at 5 o'clock. There's been quite a lot of interesting conversations, so we're finishing later than anticipated. And for the Woodford 10 plus Anthony, we'll go from 5 o'clock to 5:30, okay? So we're going to any other business, and we're going to go to anybody who hasn't yet spoken before we go to anybody who has. So again, I'm going to go to the gallery view so I can see folks. Wave something at me if you want to come in with a comment or a question. I can't see any waving yet. Not there or there. In which case, I think we're going to go back to Mr. Ian Duffel. Ian, to you, sir, as succinctly as you can. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Andy. First of all, I do have something I want to just raise with Hock and Damien in a second, but in respect to the issue about whether, because I was also with Lee Day, my understanding from the meeting that we had with them is that they only litigated against Link. My understanding is Harkus Parker and RGL also threw the blanket over Hargreaves Lansdown. So I would expect that because it's a different litigant in the way of Hargreaves Lansdown, there'd be nothing to stop you entering into litigation against Hargreaves Lansdown if you were with Lee Day, because Lee Day only were looking at Link Fund Solutions. That's my understanding. It's a lay understanding, but I think that's the issue, unless anybody knows different.
Okay.
In respect of my very brief question to Hock and Damien, Hock, you and I spoke very briefly about this, and I'm referring again back to the Unfair Contract Terms Act 1977, and there's a section in there, I think it's section 8, that specifically refers to consumers being asked to give indemnities against parties, even if those parties are not parties to the contract. So in other words, third parties. Does that also have merit in respect of this scheme of arrangement? In other words, is this considered a contract? And does the fact that Link and possibly Clifford Chance are trying to present this by way of a deed, I noticed, rather than a clause, a normal clause inside a contract? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, please, guys.
Just as a general principle, and this isn't something I've researched, Ian, because Damien and my focus is simply on stopping the scheme of arrangement.
Sure.
That's our sole focus right now. We're not looking at wider means of recovery or alternative strategies that individual investors might pursue, whether through litigation or FOS. We're just trying to kill the scheme of arrangement. That's it. Okay. Once we've done that, I'm sure that Andy will galvanize you onto the sequel part of the movie. When the Empire Strikes Back. We're just trying to blow up the Death Star today.
Sure, I understand that, okay. But does the Unfair Contract Terms Act in itself, by the way of that, it cannot, that would be an unfair term, does that in itself help kill the scheme of arrangement?
Not as far as I'm aware, because
Okay.
UCTA only deals with contracts entered into between two willing parties wanting to enter into contract, where one party effectively has an unfair bargaining position. We are talking about a scheme of arrangement under the Companies Act that is having the blessing of the court.
All
and
right, I
therefore,
understand.
it's a completely different context.
No, great. That's fine. I just wanted to understand what the key issue there was, and simply the SOA doesn't qualify as being in any way a contract or the UCAT would come under. Okay.
No.
Thanks very much for that clarification.
I missed most of that, but it sounded like it came to a logical conclusion. Thank you very much. Okay, any other business, folks, before we wrap up? And after this meeting, the Woodford 10 plus the Isle of Man 2, if they'd like to stay, plus Anthony are going to be having a conversation about next steps and strategy and tactics and what we're going to be doing between now and the end of the weekend. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, folks. There really, really is. Any other business, please wave something at me. I think we might be good. Suresh, please do come in again. Thank you. Take yourself off mute. Oh, no, I think you were just waving at me rather than raising your head. Okay. Couldn't be any more confusing. And Beryl Williams, lovely to see you, Beryl. Haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. Please do take yourself off mute, Beryl, and go for it. You're still on mute, Beryl. It's bottom left of your Zoom screen. That's it.
Hello there. I joined the meeting late. So is there any news on the vote?
That's so sweet. Yes, the news is an overwhelming vote in favour of the scheme of arrangement.
Oh my God.
An overwhelming vote in favour of the scheme of arrangement. A massive yeah. But lots of detail around that. So the focus now, Beryl, and I'll use Beryl's question as an opportunity to kind of recap. Basically, we've got two sets of arguments, folks. We've got the legal arguments that thank goodness, the Isle of Man 2 are leading on for us, which is wonderful. And there's a bunch of arguments within that, but the main one is it looks like the scheme of arrangement may well be unlawful because it takes away rights that we basically have. And it's not right that those rights are taken away. And there's a whole bunch of other arguments to do with fairness and natural justice and misinformation and all that stuff. It's all going to be wrapped up into a nice bundle that's going to get to the court, and hopefully we'll have a chance to argue those points on the 18th of January at the sanction hearing. That, folks, is the summary of where we are. I think we can wrap it up there now, and thank you all very, very much indeed for coming along today. We'll organise another session like this when it becomes sensible to do so, but brace yourself for your homework. Over the weekends, you're going to be booking in your video schedule slot if you want to do a video interview with me, and you're going to be providing the data that we urgently need to show the difference between what people get from the scheme of arrangement and what people get through the normal routine order of things via FOS, FSCS, etc. Please, 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 everybody set aside the time to do that. You'll get an email from me about it as soon as I can get it to you. Please brace yourselves to do some homework, for want of a better phrase, over the weekend. The last thing we're going to do is give us all ourselves a round of applause because we're all standing up rather than standing by. We are turbocharged by the Isle of Man 2, but in addition to them, we've got the Woodford 10 and we've got all of us as well. So folks, thank you very, very much indeed. We'll wrap it up there. We'll take a, thanks guys, thanks Hock, thanks Damien especially, and Woodford 10. Okay, so can everybody leave the meeting and read?
Andy, can I make one last request, please?
Go for it, Hock, thank you, yeah.
And that is, just to repeat that anyone who has made a complaint against Link as ACD of the scheme to FOS, please supply those details to Andy.
Yeah.
I need to see the submissions, please, that you made to FOS.
Thank you very much.
Even if, and I know they probably haven't been disposed of by FOS, but I need to see them.
Thanks, Hock. Thank you very much. I think I might be saying we circulated a note about that to everybody this morning. So hopefully you've all got an email in your inbox that says what Hock just said. Brilliant. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Can I please invite Woodford 10 and the Isle of Man 2 plus Anthony to reconvene at 5 past, okay, 5 past 5, and we'll have our strategy conversation about what we're doing for the end of the weekend. Thanks all. See you later. Thank you.